We are back on Broadcast Row at CPAC 2024. I'm here with Paul Ingrassia. Paul, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are documented as President Trump's favorite author. Tell us how that happened.
Well, listen, I write a Substack. A lot of people, it's basically an online blog, and I write articles discussing the presidential campaign, the central issues that President Trump cares about, whether it's through the weaponized system of justice that we're seeing against him, immigration, just covered so many different topics, legal, political commentary. And over time, he's picked it up, his campaign has picked it up, and he's posted about 30 or 40 or maybe even higher at this point over the past year on his Truth Social page. And then just last month, or a couple months ago now, the New York Young Republican Club, of which I am a board member, I'm on the board of advisors, hosted a gala in New York City. And during that gala, President Trump made the keynote speech. And he said, he listed a few writers there, and he said these people should be given the Pulitzer Prize because, as opposed to the fake news media who, push Russia, 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 and all the narratives that we've seen discredited over the past couple of years, as opposed to them, the people in the audience should be Pulitzer Prize winners, and I was one of the names that he mentioned. So that's how it came about.
That's great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Speaking on the campaign, it's going to be a crazy year. I think everyone agrees with that. What do you foresee happening? The primary seems to be, for all intents and purposes, over, but Haley seems to be hanging around based on who's funding her. Right. What do you make of that? And then sort of look ahead to the general.
Well, we know Reid Hoffman, the CEO or one of the head executives of LinkedIn, who's a radical far-left Democrat, he's basically financing her campaign. He's also financing this lawsuit, the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against President Trump in New York City. So how about a conflict of interest with regard to that? Trend. It's pretty ridiculous. So she's basically being propped up, in other words, by the people who hate us, who hate the movement, who hate this country. And that's the only reason why she's still in this fight. I mean, she doesn't have a base at all of supporters. Hopefully by Saturday with the South Carolina primary, she'll have the common sense enough to drop out, and hopefully it'll be enough of a victory to really knock her out. But we'll see how that unfolds.
So that's what's so interesting, because in any other time, if she were a genuine candidate who had some Republican support, it would sort of play itself out. But with this money that's being funded from the left, do you predict that she will drop out post South Carolina, or do you think this just goes on as long as there's funding behind her? What do you think?
I mean, everyone thought DeSantis would stay through for as long as he did, and he actually surprisingly dropped out. And I was up in New Hampshire right before that primary took place. So you never know. I mean, how much could they go on just money alone if she has absolutely really very limited, if any at all, support other than like liberal Democrats who are now identifying as independents or Republicans allowed to vote in these primaries. That's the only way she gets any votes at all.
I agree. Yeah. Now, who do you see the Democrats nominating in 2024 after the convention around that time? Do you think they'll stick with Biden or Kamala? You think they'll make a switch? What do you think?
I think unless Biden drops dead, these Democrats like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Dianne Feinstein, like they will literally stay in, vote the day, and then die later that evening.
And then they vote.
Right, exactly. And then they vote even more. But listen, unless save that scenario, I think Biden actually will be the nominee. And I think he's stubborn. He's a guy who's going to want to stay on. And as the clock ticks, now we're almost in March now. Right. He's still the party leader. He's still the president. So I think he will be ultimately the guy that they nominate at the convention, even though he's senile.
Well, that's fair. So even though there were so many problems with 2020. How do you see 2024 unfolding? Are you confident that enough changes have been made, or are you sort of unsure about how it's going to play out come election night?
Well, I'm not confident that enough changes in terms of our election processes have been resolved since 2020, especially under an incompetent Ronna McDaniel-led RNC. There has not been enough work and not been enough reform on that front. Hopefully we'll see that whole thing overhauled. That'll be even bigger than South Carolina. Getting a new RNC staff with Lara Trump, Chris LaCivita, and all the others that President Trump recently nominated, Whatley from New Hampshire, North Carolina. That'd be a huge thing for us in terms of moving the ball forward. But I also think the poll numbers reflect the reality on the ground. In states like Nevada, where he's up by 10 points, in states like Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, the key swing states, he is up. And I think that is true. Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of opposition, especially within the Republican establishment that runs each of these states. But all that said, I think the momentum has shifted quite decisively in his favor, even from 2020, even though that was an illegitimate rigged election. But I think it's even more so this time around, and voters are waking up.
Before we let you go, two New York guys.
Yep.
I believe New York could be in play. He's signaled, President Trump that he might make some campaign stops, Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, Madison Square Garden. Do you believe New York is in play, or even if it's not New York, maybe New Jersey, California, any of these typically blue strongholds? Do you think he could flip any of those?
I definitely think he can, and recent polling would suggest that he's within single digits in a state like New York, and it's probably even closer in New Jersey. I've been on the ground all across the state of both New York and New Jersey, mobilizing grassroots voters, trying to get them into action, putting him on the ballot in these states, and registering voters. The only problem is in a state like New York, actually both states, but really in New York, the Ed Cox-led Republican Party, which hates Donald Trump, the party establishment that runs the state, basically hates Donald Trump, and they're doing everything they can to be a roadblock for us. If they were more cooperative with the MAGA movement, with the people who support Donald Trump, with their own constituents who love Donald Trump, then it would be much more easier to flip a state like New York, or at the very bare minimum make it competitive. But that's the internal opposition within the party that we have to deal with in order to get to that reality. But I definitely believe they can be in play.
I tend to agree. Paul Ingrassia, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.